Is there a formula for success? Where would I find such a formula? For many, many years of my life, my results were mixed at best. My successes were fleeting. My failures were too many. My bank accounts were too empty. My financial situation was bleak. And I spent years searching for the answer. How could I be successful? What I realized when I finally found the formula was I was making it way too hard. All right, welcome back to Increase. I'm Blake Anderson. It is episode 64. Pleasure to be here with you for another episode of Increase. This is a podcast where we dig into the Bible. We look into the spiritual principles that yield the natural results that I think we're all after. If you're watching this podcast, then I'm assuming that you're after more. You want more in your life, and you believe that God is making a way for you more. He's equipped you for more. You know, the Bible says, John 10:10, Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it abundantly. And it is my belief that Jesus Christ came, lived, and died to free us of sin so that we could have an abundant life. I don't subscribe that this life is just to suffer until we get to heaven. Though I can't wait for that day. I think this life is a place where we live and grow, and that He wants us to expand and increase. You know, the first commandment given to man, back in Genesis, God said, be fruitful and multiply, subdue the earth. It is in our very nature to increase, to be fruitful, to multiply, to see increase come to us. And I believe that this wonderful book right here, the Bible, is probably the world's greatest success book. I do not subscribe to the poverty gospel, though I do believe there's times of struggle that forge your character. I do believe that God wants you blessed, and I believe that this book is full of the secret formulas of success, the recipes that you need to experience more. And we're going to dig right into that today. So, is there a formula for success? Could you write it out? Where would I find such a formula? For many, many years of my life, my results were mixed at best. My successes were fleeting. My failures were too many. My bank accounts were too empty. My financial situation was bleak. And I spent years searching for the answer. How could I be successful? And what I realized when I finally found the formula was I was making it way too hard. You see, I think that we unfortunately are making things way too hard on ourselves when really oftentimes the answer is right in front of us. It's not the Da Vinci Code, this formula for success. It's simple, but it's going to take you engaging it and acting on it. So what is that formula? Well, I believe the secret formula for success is strategy plus execution equals success. Strategy plus execution equals success. And maybe you might even simply put, decide what you want and do what it takes to get it. And I think the Bible is very clear about how to do that. So there's these two components, strategy and execution. And we've been talking about organizational leadership. And so today we're going to curb and frame this in an organizational setting, though you could use this for yourself. So how would I have success with my team? How would I have success with my business? Well, I've got to have a strategy and I've got to execute on it. Now, in today's thought leader space, and you hear many people talking online about business, I think there is an incredible amount of emphasis put on strategy. And hey, I'm a strategy guy. I love strategy. I find some of my greatest joy working with a team with a whiteboard and a marker in my hand. But there are two parts to this formula. And I think you will never get anywhere great if you haven't decided where you're going. But you'll never get there if you don't start taking the steps necessary to get there. So let's talk about strategy for a second. I think it's a topic everyone loves to talk about because we think that's the hardest part of the whole thing. Now, it may be the most important, maybe not. But the hardest part is really the execution. So what's the Bible have to say about strategy? Well, there's a couple of verses I absolutely love. If you heard too many of these episodes, you'll know them by heart. Proverbs 29:18 says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he." Where there is no vision, the people perish. You see, the Bible's clear. If you don't know where you're going, you won't get there. If you don't know where you're going, you'll go unrestrained. See, what the Bible is saying, it's not that you will die, but that you'll walk unrestrained. You won't get to the destination you're after. Yogi Berra, I think, said it best, that if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up somewhere else. So one of the most important parts of strategy before you do any work and any execution is you got to decide where you're going. There's teams that don't seem to get anywhere because they get really busy doing things, and everybody is doing different things, and they never end up in their destination because they never took the time to define where are we going. When is the last time you sat down with your team and asked yourselves the question, where are we going? What's the goal of what we're up to? You know, it's the first step in the organizational leadership framework. How will we know when we got there? What is the goals that we're after? And you can never revisit them enough. You can never revisit them enough. It needs to be the guiding light behind the effort that you have. Another verse on strategy that I love is Habakkuk 2, verse 2. Habakkuk's receiving a word from God, and the word says, "And the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision, make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it." Write the vision, make it plain upon tables, that he may run who readeth it. Take the time to know where you're going and take the time to write it down. Why? So that when it's time to run after it, so when it's time to do something about it, that you can run for it. And when you write that vision, make it simple, make it clear, make it accessible and available for everyone to read that vision and know how to get there. Write the vision, make it plain. I think that is worth digging into for a second. A lot of times we say a lot of things, but the meaning gets lost in too many words. I love this quote by Mark Twain. At least it was accredited to him. "If I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter." Oftentimes in your meetings, you'll find a lot of talk. And in the end, we will have talked in circles. And people will leave a meeting, and there'll be so much said, but no one will know what to do. There's such an importance on making things clear and making things simple so that when it's time to do something about it, you know what to do. So take the time to write your vision, but write it clear, write it plain, make it accessible so that everybody can move towards it. So what does that look like? How do you write an effective strategy? How do you write effective business strategy or project strategy? Well, let's not overthink it. It's actually really simple. You start asking yourself the questions: where, why, when, what, how, and who. That's how we start with a strategy. So let's get these in answer. If you're taking notes, here would be the simple process to write a strategy. There's a series of questions you ask yourself, and you ask them in this particular order. The order is critical. The first question you want to ask yourself is where? Where are we going? Right? Like Habakkuk 2 says, write the vision. Proverbs 29, without vision, the people perish. Where are we going? First, when you're creating a strategy, you need to identify where you're going. Second, why are we going there? You've got to know why. We've got to know why. You can't just assume that because I said so, we'll get the job done for your team. Everyone wants to know the context they're working in, the perspective that they need to look at. And so you decide where you're going, and you let everyone know why. And you help everyone connect their personal why with the why of the organization. The third question is when. Give yourself a deadline. When are we hoping to get there? Is this a quarterly goal? Is this a year? Is this a 3-year vision? Is this a 5-year long-term vision? So we have a strategy of where are we going? Why are we going there? When are we planning to get there? Because we've got to set a deadline so we know at what level of urgency we need to be working towards this, and we work our way backwards. We start with the end in mind. So one of the 7 habits of highly effective people, Stephen R. Covey identified that you start with the end in mind. Okay? When do we need to arrive? So we know when we need to leave. The fourth question is, what are we going to do? So most people start with what are we going to do? I make a widget. I'm in sales. I'm in accounting. It's the wrong question to start with. You first start with where am I going? Then you ask why. You got to know when. And then you decide what I'm going to do to get there. Because all of those first questions will potentially change the what. But if you start with the what, then it will govern where, why, and when. And you'll end up getting somewhere you didn't want to just because I'm in accounting, I'm good at accounting. Well, it may not necessarily get you where you're trying to get to. And that's a great question to ask yourself in life. I feel like there's too many people who've taken jobs just to take a job. They need an income, so they take whatever they can, but they never stop to ask themselves, where am I trying to get in life? And will this job take me there? What are my financial goals? And is there enough income here for me to make that possible? You know, if you want to be a millionaire, it takes one level of effort. But if you want to be a billionaire, it will take a completely different strategy altogether. If you want to be a millionaire in 3 years, that's one strategy. But if you want to be a millionaire this year, that's a completely different strategy. Because if you've decided that you want to be a millionaire this year, you may look and realize the what is going to be entirely different. And so it's got to be subordinate to the where, the why, and the when. And then after you decided what you're going to do, we create a strategy of how are we going to do it. And then along with the how is who is going to do it with us, right? Who's responsible for doing what things in the process that are going to achieve this goal to get us to our destination. It's that simple. But it's so simple that we overthink it. I think a lot of the important components are missed because we don't take time to answer these questions. And as I've said many times, some of the most important questions are the ones that are so simple you don't ask them. The simple questions we don't ask because we assume everyone knows the answer, because we're afraid we're going to look foolish, because we think it'll reveal our ignorance. But the question you're afraid to ask is the question that needs to get asked. Because you'll realize in a team, when you ask a question amongst a team of 5 people, you're likely to get 5 different answers. Well, if you have not asked the question, where are we going? And we have 5 different assumptions that everyone on the team knows where we're going, yet secretly there are 5 different answers, and so 5 different people are going in 5 different directions. Are we ever going to get there? It's so simple, you got to ask it. So great strategy. You take the time and you ask the questions. Where are we going? Why are we going there? Okay. When are we going? Or when are we planning to be there? What are we going to do to get there? How are we going? What is the process, or how are we going to do it, and who is going to do it, right? The strategy is important. But I think because we listen to so many podcasts, because we watch so many videos, because we are enamored by great ideas, the next Bitcoin or ChatGPT or iWatch, that we think that it's all about strategy. But there's so many people I meet in the business community who are marginally successful at best, and it's not because they don't strategize. They may not always have the best strategy, but I think some of the biggest failures is there is a lack of execution. Strategy must be married with execution, or you'll never get there. What's the Bible have to say about that? Right? Well, Proverbs 6, verse 10 and 11 kind of gives a haunting warning about the lack of execution. And I think there's a lot of big talkers. I got big plans. I'm going to do big things. I want big this. I'm going to get a new car. You might hear them at the barbecue on Saturday, but what I want to know is, what are they doing on Monday to make that possible, right? So here's what Proverbs chapter 6, verse 10 says, "Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man." A little sleep, a little slumber, and the poverty will come upon you. Oh, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be broke again. I've been poor, and it's not something I'm interested in. It's not fun, and I'm no good to anybody when I'm broke. And what Proverbs is saying is, if you're going to sleep in, if you're not going to put in the work, if you're going to call it quits early, you should expect the poverty to come upon you. And I think there's a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs who love to get in front of a whiteboard, who love to have coffee with a new contact, who love to talk. And I've been invited to lots of meetings of people who will talk. But there's fewer people who know how to execute a strategy to completion, who will execute until they get success. So a great strategy, though pointing you in the right direction, will never get you there alone. It will take execution to get there. 1 Corinthians 4, verse 20, Paul's writing to the Corinthians, and he's admonishing them about a teacher that they were replacing him with. But I think this goes for this as well. So 1 Corinthians 4, verse 20, says, "For the kingdom of God is not in word, but in power." Kingdom of God is not about talk, it's about power. And I think what he's saying is, it's not about talking, it's about doing. And there's a lot of people who've gotten really comfortable talking, and they've fallen out of love with doing. James chapter 2, verse 26 says that faith without works is dead. See, if you can believe for great things, but don't expect those great things to happen until you start doing something about it. Now, I don't have time to fully break down my philosophy of faith and co-laboring with God. There's been so many episodes we've talked about that, and maybe we'll talk about that soon, because I believe the best things will happen when God gets involved. You've got to make room for him to get involved, but you can't just sit on your couch and expect him to do everything. See, there's a division of labor. There are things that God has promised to do for you, but there are things that you are responsible for. And you've got to learn what those are and embrace those responsibilities. And we might revisit that in another episode. But faith without works is dead. Your strategy on your whiteboard won't get it done. You've got to execute. Now, I could stop right there. I think we all know and have been told, you got to put in the work. And sometimes it is that simple. You just go to work. Sometimes you just do it when you don't feel like it. Sometimes you just got to start earlier and you got to work later. Sometimes you need to back up and think about how you can work smarter, not harder. But there is some method to the madness of execution. And I want to take a few minutes just to give you some pointers, because I think a lot of people struggle with execution for a few reasons. And with kind of these strategies, hopefully we can dispel some of the myths and put you on a path to start doing something about the plans that you have, so that you can have the success that you've never experienced before. Now, these do not diminish the importance of strategy. Hear me out, it's super important. But once you have that great strategy, then we've got to know how to execute on it. So the first thing that you've got to know about executing on a strategy is to be efficient and effective, you need to have a process. Okay? There's got to be a process in which you're executing on. I wouldn't just start and just do a bunch of random crap. You need to take the time to make sure that there's an effective process, especially if you're bringing a team together. And so when you think about processes, there's a couple of rules of thumb. A process needs to be simple, and a process needs to be clear. Okay? Simple scales, fancy fails. I love it. Tony Robbins says complexity is the enemy of execution. Some of you aren't executing effectively because what you're trying to do is not clear and you don't even feel clear or confident in what you're doing. Some of the tasks that you've delegated to your team aren't getting done because you haven't given clear enough instruction or clear enough process for your team to execute on. Okay? So it's got to be simple and it's got to be clear. And then the process has got to be comprehensive. You've got to map out the process in a comprehensive way so that everything gets done, right? And so we gave an example of an effective exercise that you can do in another episode. I believe it was in the Organizational Leadership Framework, step 4, the process, and that's the Lifecycle exercise. This is a very simple exercise. It's super effective to get everybody on the same team. And so when you're creating a process to execute on, you want to map out everything that has to get done to complete the project. And then you need to go through and you need to assign responsibilities for every single task. And so everyone on the team writes their name above each task. What you'll find is everyone knows probably about 75% of what needs to get done. But there's the last 25% that's assumed. And it's those last 25% that's not getting done regularly or is getting done twice by 2 people, or maybe the wrong person is doing. That if you'll take the time to map out the life cycle of a project, every step that's got to get done in its life cycle to completion, and you assign responsibilities to everybody, then you'll have clarity on the team and everybody will be able to confidently execute. So if you want to execute, have a simple, clear, comprehensive process. As I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you've assigned responsibilities for every task so that everything is accounted for. And then you need to have a sense of urgency. Execution demands a sense of urgency. That's a real thing lacking in the business world. Have you noticed? You send a request to somebody, you don't hear back from them for a week or a month. You call to follow up and it's like they didn't remember. Or, oh yeah, I was going to get to it. You ask your team member if they can, they want to help you on a project and they don't say when, and they do a little bit here or there. There is a real lack of urgency and some apathy in unsuccessful people and unsuccessful teams. The most successful people work on purpose with urgency. The most successful teams have urgency in what they're doing. And you can do that in a couple of ways. You can create urgency with deadlines. So when you have a project, create a deadline. If you have in your business, you might be able to do that by tying payment or bonus structure to accomplishing certain goals. We've seen some really impressive results as we've tied compensation to completion of work. And you create a sense of urgency when someone's income is tied to producing. I don't love the model of business where people get salaries just for showing up. There's no urgency there. You get some really mediocre results as businesses. You're not near as profitable as you could be. And oh, by the way, Mr. or Mrs. Employee who loves your stable, safe salary, there's so much more money to be made if you're good at something, if you're able and willing to get paid when you complete it. Because see, if you're good at something, then you can get it done. You will get it done much faster and can make so much better money. Okay, so with urgency, use deadlines to create urgency. The other thing that you can create urgency is you plan your work and then you work your plan. And so you plan urgency into your work. Oftentimes, just setting aside a block of time and limiting the amount of time that you're allowed to work on something will get it done faster. It's called Parkinson's Law. And Parkinson's Law states that work will expand to fill the amount of time that's given it. So if you have a project that would normally take 3 hours, if you don't give yourself a deadline, that project could end up taking 10 hours, 12 hours, or more without a deadline, because the work will just expand to fill the time whatever you give it. Now the reverse is true. If I have a project that on a normal day will take me 3 hours, but I give myself an hour and a half window, blocked out time where I'm undisturbed, I can normally get a 3-hour project done in less than an hour and a half. I'll tell you what, you give me an hour and a half, my first hour and a half of the day, and there's no phone calls and there's no emails, I can probably get what most people will get done in 8 hours, in about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I know the same is true for you. So along with urgency, create blocks of time to complete certain work. Block the time out where you're going to do something uninterrupted. So you plan your work and then you work the plan. And there's 3 ways to look at it. You plan your week on your calendar. It's an effective way to add urgency before you start your week. Map out your whole week as far as your appointments and the certain blocks of time you're going to work on certain projects, especially if you've got to work with other people. Think about each day. Block each day out with the things that you're trying to accomplish. And then you can block out each hour and give yourselves micro blocks of time with deadlines to accomplish certain things. The ideal amount of working time is going to be an hour and a half or less. The earlier in the day that you're working, probably the more time that you can have uninterrupted. As the day progresses on, your attention span starts to wane. You need to shorten those up to 55 or 45 minutes. Set a timer, stop, go take a 5-minute break, breath of fresh air, go outside, take your mind off of it, and come back to it. But urgency is so important for effectiveness. If you're wanting to increase with a promotion, with a raise, then you've got to start working with urgency. You got to show the people around you that you mean business and you can be trusted with a deadline and that you know how to get things done. So I said a lot in this last half hour, but I want to remind you how simple the success formula is. It's the right strategy coupled with execution will lead to success. Take the time to create a good strategy, a comprehensive and a thorough strategy. Not a perfect strategy, because it'll never be perfect, but a good one. Ask the questions: where, why, when, what, how, and who. And then execute on it. Create a process that the whole team can use together. Assign responsibilities of everything that needs to get done. And then create a sense of urgency with deadlines in the way you plan your work and work your plan. And watch your results begin to change almost instantaneously. You just charge your intention towards these results, and you sit in the front of your seat rather than the back of your seat, the balls of your heels rather than on the back of your heels, you're going to see some different results. You start a lifestyle of that, and you're going to start to get a reputation for someone who gets things done, for someone who is successful. So God bless you wherever you're watching or listening, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I really appreciate you. Hit me up with a direct message. Love to hear how I can help. And we'll see you next week for another episode of Increase.